Good morning. So yes, we are back for another one of our weekly Q&A sessions. So normally 12 o'clock, but today I've got a commitment that I couldn't get out of, so I'm going to do it at 9 o'clock this morning. But in future sessions, this will return to 12 o'clock next week. So before we get going, I just wanted to let you know again, so this is going to be streamed out directly to YouTube and to Facebook at the same time. So if you are watching this on YouTube, there is a chat feature to the right hand side of the screen if you're on a desktop. If you ask any questions on there, they will get flagged up here and I'll be able to see those. If you're watching the replay, then do by all means comment with some questions underneath this, and I will then get back to those in future weeks. If you're able to, because it would be a massive favour if underneath this video you just click the little thumbs up icon to like the video, and just also make sure you follow or subscribe to the channel, and that way you'll not miss out on future weekly Q&A sessions when I do them. Equally, if you're watching this on Facebook, whether you're watching this at the time or whether you're watching this afterwards, if you use the comments feature underneath the video to ask your questions, and again I'll see those and do my best to answer those now or in future weeks. And again, same thing, if you click like underneath the video, that little thumbs up icon, and make sure you do follow Never Told to Lift on Facebook or even Chris Tiley Physiotherapy, then you'll make sure that you'll get to see these in future weeks. Good, so before we get going with any of the questions I've been sent in, I wanted to share with you a paper that I've read in the past, but I read again recently, that I think is really useful to see, and it highlights the power of consistency with training. So let me just bring that up. So this paper looked at the role of muscle strengthening for knee OA, so painful arthritic knees. And what they found was when they put people who came into the study with painful arthritis, they then put them through a muscle strengthening program, and they monitored their strength in their knee extensors, so those quadricep muscles, so the ones that extend the knee, so kick the leg forwards. So they measured with quite precisely the strength of those with a dynamometer, and at various points through the program they sort of checked in on that strength. And what they found is, whilst people getting stronger initially, they weren't actually noticing that their pain was reducing, and they weren't noticing that any disability associated with the pain was improving, until they reached roughly 30 to 40% of the strength. So once they looked at the baseline strength, once they'd put on an additional 30 to 40% strength, then suddenly it seemed to be this kind of threshold where their pain suddenly then started to come down, and any disability associated with their pain came down as well. And why this is so important, why you kind of use this and talk about it so much, is that the amount of people I come in and see me in the clinic as a physiotherapist, they say that they've tried muscle strengthening and it hasn't worked and nothing's helped. And then when I go back and ask them a little bit more about what they've actually tried, they've only actually tried the muscle strengthening for about 3-4 weeks, a couple of months maximum. And you might have heard me say in previous weeks that in order for the muscle to actually change in size physiologically, it's about 3 months from starting something new to the point you get change. You probably get some increases in strength in that time because your brain learns how to use the muscle strength you've already got more efficiently. But actually, in terms of producing that 30 to 40% increase in strength, it's probably going to take you close to a few months to get to that point, which means if you're giving up before 3 months and you haven't noticed any pain relief, it's probably because you just haven't given it long enough. There are some people that, despite no matter what you do, the pain isn't necessarily going to come down, but for a lot of people, increasing the quad strength particularly will result in a reduction of pain to some degree. And as this study found, they found it was that kind of 30-40% range of increase from the previous strength that caused that pain relief. So key takeaway message there is, if you're going to try strength training with partly the goal in mind is you want to reduce your pain, and this can obviously it was a study for the knee, but I've not seen any sort of specific studies, but it does kind of start to carry over into back pain as well and other areas of pain. So you do want to try and take the similar concepts, but try and commit to at least a kind of a 3-month window of training before you've decided that this isn't working for your pain, because you can't really decide off a month of training that it hasn't worked for you, so you're going to give up with it all. Good. So as a reminder, just if you're watching on YouTube, use the chat feature to ask me any questions live, or if you're on Facebook, you can use a comment underneath the video to ask your questions there, and I'll do my best to ask any questions. Last night I did put a post out on Facebook to ask for any questions, and I got a few in, so I'll start to cover some of those. So first one was quite a brief question to start with. So it's arthritis and lifting, how? ? So asked him to elaborate a little bit in is the arthritis in any specific joints. So they went on to say the usual joints, the knees. Now 65, pain stops me doing simple exercises like squats, which I know will help. Question is there anything I can do to help me start weights again? Currently use a stationary bike, but obviously this doesn't help with strength training. I don't intend in doing much power training. Very kind regards. So yes, I can share with you what works, what tends to work best for me. There's kind of two approaches I take, and I often use them in combination with each other. So with painful knees, you tend to find that there is this kind of threshold of force that goes through the knee that then goes from a non-painful state to suddenly make it in a painful. And that can be one of two things. So often it's the amount of weight that you're having to lift or move. So body weight, people can often get through range of motion and back up again without any pain at all. As soon as they get to a certain threshold, say, 20 kilograms, suddenly that's enough for their pain to start going, I'm not happy here. And then the higher you go with the weight, the more angry the knee gets. The other one is actually the depth. So it doesn't necessarily matter how much weight you're carrying or holding or lifting. As you start to go down and you bend the knee, holding that weight, often the first part feels fine, and then it's as you get into a deeper range of motion that you suddenly hit that kind of threshold of force through the knee again. And then again, suddenly the knee tells you it's not happy, and it can start to cause a reaction and flare up. So we can use kind of that in the training. And so for a lot of people, if they can't go through a full body weight squat, rather than thinking, let's not do a squat, I tend to start getting people to squat down to a box. So we've got one of those boxes that you can flip it one way and it's 20 inches, you flip it another way, it's 24, and another way it's 30. So normally get people to start on the 20-inch box. If that's too much, I'll flip it up and get them onto the 24-inch box. And then they'll generally just start to sit to stand from there. And once I've found a range of motion that they can tolerate, then we can start adding weight in. And what I generally find is that there often isn't a weight in that comfortable range of motion that actually brings their pain on. So you can actually start lifting, and it sounds like you've got some experience in the past with lifting, so you could probably find that you can get quite quickly up to 60, 70, 80 kilos standing up from a 20-inch box and standing up and sitting back down again. And because you never go deep enough, because the box is always going to catch you, you find that the knee doesn't flare up, and you actually get to the point where you can push your muscles to fatigue. And it's by pushing the muscles to fatigue that they're going to get stronger. And then once you've done that for a while, you can often find that by reducing the weight and then reducing the height and finding another surface that's slightly lower, you can actually start to get down lower and lower before your pain comes on. And then once you've found, again, that comfortable range, you then build the weight back up, and so forth. And that's been a really good strategy for a lot of people that I've used. There's one in mind, and I'll try and find the video and put it on here, but a guy called Phil who came in at 76, having never lifted in at all in the past. and it was a painful knee that he came in with. And we did exactly that. We started with a 20-inch box, and started and gradually built that up to 60 kilograms, and he was able to do that pain-free. And then we took the weight right back off again, and then we used one of the raised kind of the Reebok steps, so it wasn't anywhere near the height. So if you looked kind of side on for the box as he went into a squat, he might reach kind of about 50 degrees bend at most, and then when he was doing this to the step, he was getting just beyond a 90-degree bend, where he could not have done that to start with. But again, it took several months of persisting through that to get to there. The other strategy that I've found that I love to kind of bring in, and this has been one of the most useful images I've found for a while. Excuse me. So you see, it's not my image. It's a guy called Tony Camella at the bottom there. He's worth following on Instagram if you find him there. But so he's put all the different exercises from different variations of deadlift to squats, ranging from that left to right. And then you can see on the bottom he's put the hip dominant on one side and the knee dominant on the other side. So hip dominant is often referred to as glute dominant, and knee dominant is often referred to as quad dominant. And what that means is the more of the force is shared through the hip in those exercises to the left, and as you move over to the right, the knee is going to take most of the force, with the hips taking less. If we look at the muscles included, so we said glutes and quads, in all of these exercises there is some activation of both the glutes and the quad muscles. They work in combination together, but depending on how far left or right we are, it depends on the ratios that we get. So on the right, you're going to get a lot more of the glutes being active, and the quads aren't going to be quite so active there, but they are going to be active and they are going to get worked. Equally, if we go to the right hand side of that, for the overhead squat, the quads are going to get a lot more of that force. They're going to have to do the bulk of the work, and the glutes are just going to do a little bit to help. But again, they are getting worked. So if you find that, and I'll just go over some of those squats. So overhead squat is the bar is above your head. And a front squat is you've got the bar across the front of your chest and you're kind of holding it up. So as you go into a squat with either of those, if you tip too far forwards, the bar is going to want to fall off of you. Same if you're here and you tip forwards, the bar is going to try and fall forward, so it's too much force on your shoulders. So it forces you to have to squat with a more upright body position, which means the hips aren't bending quite so much, which means the knees are taking a lot more of the brunt or the force there. As we come down into this low bar squat and high bar squat, they're two different variations of the back squat. So the back squat is the bar is across your back, and then high bar and low bar it's how high it sits on the back. So standard is kind of the high bar, and low bar it might sit a little bit further down. And because it's on your back, you can tip your back forwards and it's not going to suddenly roll off you because it's just been nicely supported by the back. So your glutes can do a bit more of the work than they can, say, for the overhead squat. But say you were trying to do that high bar squat and the pain in the knee was limiting how far you could squat or how much you could progress with that, then there's two options. The one is what I've just talked about, where we could just work heavy but not go through the depth. Equally, we might want to try and take a couple of steps over to the left. So we might then go for a sumo deadlift or a trap bar deadlift. And although it's more of a hip dominant exercise, your quads are going to get worked in that as well. So you can start to get the confidence of lifting heavy without reaching the threshold to cause any knee pain. And then if you do that for long enough and you can build the weight there, suddenly you might be able to go back to the high bar squat and use a very small weight, but whereas you couldn't do anything before, you might now find that you've got enough resilience and tolerance in your knee to be able to start to do a little bit with the squat and then gradually build that up from there. And again, if you're combining that with doing shallow squats and gradually making those slightly deeper as pain allows, then that is the kind of strategy I tend to use with people. But like you say, just doing bike on its own won't build the strength. It's great for the knee as well, so I wouldn't stop doing that, in the same way as a lot of people with knee pain tend to move towards swimming or yoga or Pilates. But in order to build a squat, if you can't do a normal deep squat, try different depth squats until you find one you're comfortable with, and then build the weight from there, so you can start to really push those quads to fatigue. Or try this where you're trying to do a different variation of an exercise that does use both the hips and or the quads and the glutes together. And third option is you've also got machine weights. So leg press is really useful, because whereas a body weight squat, the least amount of weight that you can squat is how much you weigh. A leg press, you can actually set the weight to a lot less of that, so you can then start to work with only half your body weight or even a quarter of your body weight, and often that is enough to, again, bring you underneath the threshold where you can get the knee moving in a similar movement pattern to the squat with no pain, and then you can gradually build the weight up. And once you're doing the leg press with the equivalent of your body weight, you can then start to try body weight squats again, and often find you've built some tolerance in there. So again, it's all about finding the starting point and then making gradual progressions on from there. So yeah, I hope that helps. For anyone else watching live now, do feel free to ask any questions. So if you're on YouTube, use the chat feature. If you're on Facebook, use a comment feature under the video. Again, if you're watching the replay, then do leave a question in the comments and I will get back to that in future weeks. Just wanted to take the opportunity to mention that if anyone is looking to get started, then I do have a completely free ebook that you can download that will guide you through creating your own 12-week strength training program. So you can get that from nevertoiltolift.com/start-here. And just a reminder of what I mentioned earlier, if you want to learn a bit more in depth, I'm going to be running these webinars or these kind of free online presentations. So it is just like an hour-long presentation that I'll go through with slides, and try and make it as interactive as I can. And they're going to be on Tuesday the 9th of January at 7 o'clock in the evening, and Wednesday the 10th at 1 o'clock. That will be completely live, so you can ask questions as we're going through as well. But in order to sign up for that, so if you go to nevertoiltolift.com/webinar, you'll be able to find the details for registration there, and you will need to register in order to access either of those days. They are the same presentation on both days, so don't feel like you have to come to both of them. I've just put a couple of different times on there to try and suit everybody. Good, so next question is very similar to the last one. It's this time, instead of the back, it's instead of the back knee pain, it's back pain. So this person said 3 questions: lifting weights and looking after mechanical back pain, normally low level but can flare up with 0 warning. And then second question, how do you build progressions week on week? And then 3, will it be available after today as I'll be at work? So third question is, he couldn't make the live Q&A session but wanted to know if the recording is available. So yes, I'll make sure I'll send this out to him. But yeah, those first 2 questions I'll take one at a time. So the first one, lifting weights with mechanical low back pain. This is actually going to be very similar to my last answer with the knee pain, is we can do exactly the same thing. So often when you're doing an exercise, so it's generally going to be exercises towards the left of that image earlier. So it's more the deadlift type actions, those hip hinging ones, that are the ones that they're going to put more stress through the back, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, because we want to teach the back to tolerate those stresses and the demands that we're asking it to do, so that it learns to become more robust and resilient. So a lot of people demonize deadlifts and think they're bad, because if people are ever going to get back pain, it tends to be on a deadlift rather than a squat. So automatically people think deadlifts are bad for backs, especially with weight. I'm not going to do them. I'm scared of them. I don't want to cause myself an injury. But then the back becomes deconditioned to stress and load, which might be fine initially, but eventually you're going to do something in an everyday life, and such as lifting a bit of furniture to get something underneath it, or lifting something heavy in the garden. And if you haven't prepared your back for that and you move slightly awkwardly, that's where back can flare up again. So we do need to lift to build strength and resilience in the back. But again, it might be there's a threshold of how much weight you can tolerate right now, but there also could be a threshold of the depth that you can manage in order to be able to lift from to start with. So just like someone, I might get them to squat to a higher surface, so they're just going through a shallower motion. For deadlifts, you can do exactly the same. So rather than, say, lifting, if you're doing a conventional deadlift where you're lifting the bar from the floor and up, rather than do it from the floor, you might prop up the weight plates on something. So you could use, sometimes I just use a 20 kilo plate that's a few inches that you can then rest that on top of. You can use some of the safety bars within a squat rack. You can set that at a kind of lower height, so you rest the bar onto there to begin with, so it's kind of maybe level with the bottom of your knees, and then you're just going through almost like we call them rack pulls, or it's kind of it's effectively a Romanian deadlift, because you're then not lifting to as low as the floor. But you can start to build that movement pattern with weight, and if you're going through a shallow motion that's within your pain-free range of motion, you can then build that quite heavy without the risk of flaring the back up and building the strength around it. And then eventually you can reduce the depth to which you're then trying to do your deadlifts. So that's a really useful way of doing it. And then exactly this again, you can use, rather than, if you struggle with a Romanian deadlift, you could then actually say, well, rather than go for the Romanian deadlift, I'm going to move a couple of exercises across to the right. So I might start to go for that trap bar deadlift, and I didn't talk through that last time. So Romanian deadlift is where you start in standing with the bar across your waist, and you then start to bend, and your bar lowers about level with your knees, and you come back up again. So your start point is upright and your finish point is then back upright again. Whereas a conventional deadlift, the bar starts on the floor, so then you've got to pick the bar up, stand up, and then put it back to the floor. So your start point and end point is then the floor again. Trap bar deadlift is, you might have seen these hexagonal type these bars within the gym that you stand inside of. That's commonly called a hex bar or a trap bar, and the reason they're useful is because there's space in front of your knees, so your knees can actually drift forward a little bit slightly, so that you can then start to perform the movement pattern, but you don't have to be quite as strict on your technique. So again, in terms of us sharing the load between the hips and the knees, if the knees are bending forward slightly, they're starting to bend and take a little bit more of the load, which means they're shielding the hip and the back from some of that load. So you might find that that's just enough then to bring enough stress off the back that you can start to build a lot heavier with that trap bar deadlift. Or you might go for sumo deadlift, where your hands are inside your knees rather than either side of the bar, or on the bar either side of the legs. So again, it tends to allow a position where it's a bit more comfortable for the back. So again, you could start down lower this end, and then once you've done that for a while, you can then reduce the weight and then try and get back up to the Romanian deadlift. So again, that's a couple of strategies there, but the important thing is you do want to, rather than, if your back is risk, it does flare up from time to time, rather than think deadlifts aren't for me, I'm going to avoid those and just work on the squats. You do want to work on the deadlifts, but you just want to be careful how we're doing it, gradually build that tolerance in the back to be able to do that, and then you can build beyond that and create this buffer, so suddenly anything you do day to day is less likely to be an issue and cause a reaction. Perfect. So just a reminder, feel free to send those questions in whilst we're watching live. I mentioned about the free ebook that I've got. There is another option, that if you are wanting a slightly more interactive way of learning how to get started with strength training, then I do have an online course as well, which is called Stronger for Life. So with that, it's very much video based. You'll get 7 modules split into kind of 9 lessons per module, that each are about 5 minutes. So small bite-sized chunk videos, and then you'll get weekly group sessions via Zoom with me to go over any sticking points or any difficulties you might be having. So if that's something you might be interested, that's a bit easier to follow than the book, then you can go from nevertoldtolift.com/course to learn more there. But for the moment, I'll go through the last question that I was sent in this week. And again, it's a slightly vaguer question, but it's where to start for unfit beginner, please. So it's sometimes difficult without knowing a little bit more, but generally it doesn't matter how unfit you are, you can get started with strength training at any point. So if you've never done it before and everything that you go through is going to be new to you, then we can take a lot more time on the kind of learning phase and becoming familiar with the different exercises and movement patterns that we're going to go through. And you don't need to progress too quickly to the point where you're really pushing your muscles to fatigue and getting uncomfortable with the exercises. You can take a lot longer to build there. So it means you're not then really going to be getting out of breath with it. You can build your fitness up at the same time as you build your confidence levels up, until eventually you kind of push for the muscle fatigue where you're going to really get the strength. And that's why I generally go for. So the big thing you really need to start with is a little bit more of a plan. And I mentioned this last time, how important it is, and especially for people who are thinking of getting into strength training as a New Year's resolution. So if you start it and your only idea is from January that I'm going to start turning up to the gym 2-3 times a week, and that's about as much of a plan as you thought of, you'll turn up to the gym, and for the first few sessions it'll be fine because you'll get there and you'll have this kind of new motivation. You might see a bit of equipment that's free, you'll go maybe try that one, and then you'll maybe try something else, and then the next week you might come in, those bits of equipment that you did do, they're not free anymore, but those bits are, so you'll try those. So you then haven't done the exercises you did last week and you're doing new exercises this time, and then if there's no structure or routine to it, you're then less likely to improve with each of those exercises. So what you want to try and do, and without sort of being a plug for it, but do have a look at that free ebook, because that will guide you through creating the program. You want to try and create some workouts that are going to challenge the whole of the body. So I tend to work off these 7 functional movement patterns. So you've got a form of squat, that's kind of sitting down type action, a form of hip hinge, which is that kind of deadlift where you're kind of hinging at the hips and less at the knees. A form of kind of a lunge where one foot is ahead of the other as you're lowering down to the floor and back up. Some form of push, so you're pushing something away from you, or you're pushing yourself away from the floor, like in a push-up. Pull, where you're pulling an item towards you, or you're pulling yourself up towards a bar, like in a pull-up. Trunk rotation, where you can use resistance bands for those, and something where you're carrying a weight. So there's kind of 7 movement patterns there, and if you can try and incorporate one exercise of each of those 7 movement patterns and do those each week, and you might split them into kind of 2 workouts, you might only do 4 workouts per week, that's a really good starting point. And then you want consistency of working on that for about 3 months, and rather than thinking you do those one week and then you completely change everything again the next week and completely change again the next week. Once you've got that routine, you do want to stick at it consistently and try and build on it each week. And then what you want to do is, once you've put together those exercises into a program, you're then going to want to really try and get as familiar with those exercises as you can. So initially, I'm not even too worried about how intensely you push. It's just getting the routine of turning up to the gym or at home. It doesn't have to be in the gym at all. Going through that workout, and you should find, because you're not pushing yourself too hard to start with, again, the fact that if you're unfit at the start, it's not holding you back. But if you find it is, and you find you get really out of breath, you can break that down even further. You could do it, rather than 2 sessions per week, for half an hour, you can maybe do 4 15-minute sessions until you find your fitness comes up. And then once you find that you're not limited by the fitness and you've got full confidence in the exercises, you can then start adding the resistance and building that resistance, so that ideally, and I talk in the ebook, that you're going to start to try and get the muscles to the point of fatigue, so that the last repetition is almost the last repetition you could have done. And if you can push to that level, that's where you do get a little bit stronger. And then once you're comfortable with that concept to push into fatigue, initially you might start that about 15 repetitions, and then the next week you might aim to increase the weight a little bit more, so that somewhere between 12 and 15 you reach that fatigue point, and then you might try and do it for 10 to 12, then from 8 to 10, and then eventually, if you can get that fatigue point down to about 5 repetitions, that's fantastic. And I'd say that's generally over a bare minimum of 3 months. If you're going to need a lot more time at the start to get confident with everything and just make sure the fitness isn't holding you back, then that whole process might take more like 5-6 months. But again, it needs to be a commitment, and it needs to be something you're going to work at 2 to 3 weeks. But the big thing is having that plan and having that idea of progressing week on week. So yeah, I hope that helps. I think, like I say, if you're completely new to this, you want an idea where to start, then do take a look at that free ebook. So just a reminder again, it's just here. So it's nevertoldtolift.com/start here. That will guide you through all that kind of theory of the different movement patterns. You're going to get ideas of different exercise variations for each of those movement patterns, because there might be one you can't do, but then there's hopefully then one you can do. And if you can't, just reach out to me and we can always try and brainstorm other ideas. And then it's going to guide you through putting them in that program where you're doing 4 exercises in one workout, and then another workout, another 4 exercises. And then it's going to guide you through when to progress and add some weight and resistance. So yeah, I hope that helps, and I hope that inspires you to get started. And again, if you do want a bit more help with that, then those webinars in January are aimed at it's aimed at anyone who's a complete beginner who's just wanting to get started with strength training, or anyone who's had a bit of a gap, who doesn't know now where to start because of fears of pain. So I think this would be perfect for you, so do consider signing up to that. So it's nevertoldtolift.com/webinar. Don't think there's any more questions that will come in at the moment, and we're on about the half-hour mark, which is about what we've been doing so far. So yeah, as a reminder, if you are now watching this on the replay, do leave a question in the comment, and I will check back and we can have a look at going through that next week. Next week it's going to be at 12 o'clock, the normal time, and we should be settling into that. And I think I'm planning on doing it the Wednesday in between Christmas and New Year's, and then especially going into New Year's, I realise a lot more people will be thinking about getting started if they haven't already done so with strength training. So yeah, any questions, feel free to come to those live Q&A sessions with those. Once again, if you found this useful, I'd really appreciate it if you give the video a little thumbs up and click the like button. If you haven't already followed Never Told to Lift on YouTube and on Facebook, then please do so you'll make sure you don't miss out on these in the future. One last little reminder of all those things I talked about there. So I am doing a Christmas giveaway, so you can get a copy of Atomic Habits, a copy of the physical book of Never Told to Lift. So it's available ebook, but you can find it on Amazon as well as a paperback copy. But if you win the giveaway, you'll win that. You'll get a physical copy of the goal planner and workout template, and then you'll get a £20 voucher to spend in the Never Told to Lift store, where you can get t-shirts, water bottles, hoodies, etc. Once you've entered, do make sure that you check your email to confirm your email, because without doing that you won't be eligible to win, so the software requires you to do that. And then you can also come back and then you can earn bonus entries to increase your chances of winning. So by sharing it on different social medias, you get more points, and if someone then enters the giveaway off the back of that, you then get entries for every person who signs up. And then there's another list of things you can do there, including just checking back in every day, and that will get you another bonus point. And that's up until the end of Sunday, and then I'll be announcing the winner on Monday. So that's the first one there. So nevertoldtolift.com/giveaway. If you're interested in learning more, then do check out the free ebook. So it's completely free. All you need to put in is your email, and that'll be sent over to you. So that's nevertoldtolift.com/start-here. And all the links will be in the comments below, both YouTube and the Facebook video. If you want a more interactive way of going through the theory in that ebook, then you can go to nevertoldtolift.com/course, and that's access to the online course that I'm running, and you'll get weekly group Zoom chats with me as well to go through. So they've been great because we've almost created a little bit of community now within there, and it's not just questions. People come in for the accountability and just to share their progress and to spur others on, and because they know they're coming into the calls each week, it spurs them to want to do the workout so they can share with us how they're getting on. So it's been really great to see everyone working, progressing as they've been working through the course. So if someone who doesn't quite like or is less likely to take action from a book, and actually having that bit of community and those video to go through, then the course might be something you're interested in. And then I think that is everything. So, as a reminder, next week at 12 o'clock is the next Q&A session, and I will see you there.